Welcome to Clarity, a podcast powered by the Thomson Reuters Institute. I'm Zach Warren, the Institute's Legal Insights and Strategy Lead. In each episode, we dive deep into a single question from decision makers and thought leaders from legal, corporate, tax accounting and audit, and government communities. In today's episode, we discuss the big question, what do professionals need to do now to prepare for the tech-enabled future of 2030? Quick question, did you realize that 2030 is now just 4 years away? I know, I'm the bearer of bad news and all. But still, that means we're in the range where planning that begins today will have a direct impact on how you, your colleagues, and your organization functions by the time we hit the new decade. A lot can happen in 4 years. Generative AI is still only about 3 years in the public sphere after all. But at the same time, it's through proper planning that professionals will be able to weather any changes. So, what can you do now? To kick off the 2026 calendar year, we convened a roundtable of TRI's experts to provide their own predictions, moderated by TRI Content Manager Greg Worth. We start off by looking at the people and technology landscapes at large, then dive into the government, risk and fraud, legal, and tax and accounting spheres. I had fun recording this with the team, and I hope you have fun listening.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the new season of Clarity, a Thomson Reuters Institute podcast where we explore the trends reshaping the professional and business landscape. I'm Greg Worth, content manager at the Thomson Reuters Institute, and the moderator for today's episode. We're kicking off our first episode of 2026 with a big question that's likely going to define the rest of this decade. What do professionals need to do now to prepare for the tech-enabled future of 2030? We're currently at a moment in which AI and other emerging technologies are moving from experimentation to everyday use that impacts how work is getting done across law, tax, corporate risk, government, and other professional services. The year 2030 may sound far off, but in reality, the choices that professionals make this year will go a long way toward determining whether they're ready or playing catch-up when we get there. To dig into this, I'm joined by my colleagues at the Thomson Reuters Institute, who each bring a different lens on that future. Bryce England, who focuses on technology and innovation trends across professional services. Natalie Runyon, who will look at the human side of tech and AI and how people and talent are adapting. Rabia Butler, who will connect this to what's happening in corporate risk and compliance, as well as how these innovations are affecting government and the courts. Zachary Warren, who will examine the implications for corporate legal departments and law firms. And finally, Nadia Britton, who will explore what a tech-enabled 2030 means for tax professionals and corporate tax teams. We'll begin with the big technology and human capital picture and then move to what this means for specific segments. So Bryce, let's start with you on the technology and innovation front. You spend your time looking across markets at how technologies, especially AI-driven tools and solutions, are actually being adopted inside professional service organizations. When you think about professionals today looking ahead 5 years to a tech-enabled 2030, what are the most important technology-driven shifts they will need to understand? And just as importantly, what should they be doing this year to get ready for those shifts?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Greg. So, one of the recent rabbit holes I've fallen down these days is watching blacksmithing videos on YouTube. And they're really cool and technical and complex, but from what I've seen, they really boil down into a two-step process that gets repeated over and over if you want to shape metal. The first is you heat the metal until it's malleable, and then you beat it into shape. Sparks fly, weak spots get exposed, and mistakes are paid for. The latter stage is where I think generative AI is headed as we start approaching 2030. The hype phase, the heating, I think that phase is pretty much finished, at least for a little while. Now we're entering the hammering part, and it's going to be noisy, difficult, but necessary. So, what should we expect from Gen AI and technology further in 2030? I've got 3 predictions that can help people navigate to that place, and I'll warn you up front, they're not all necessarily rosy. The first is that increasingly people are going to be looking for receipts. Organizations are done taking Gen AI's value on faith. Usage dashboards, prompt libraries, those were fine in the experimentation phase for getting things up and running, getting people to try out the technology, but that phase is ending. Leadership is starting to want hard numbers and they want them now. ROI, efficiency gains, measurable outcomes, proof that the vast mountains of treasure they've invested in this technology is actually making their organizations stronger. Here's a little bit of the irony, though. There's a real risk that proving ROI becomes its own expensive endeavor. New tools, new workflows, even new roles dedicated just to measuring whether the AI investment is paying off. That friction is somewhat unavoidable. It's a classic case of growing pain when you move from the promise of legal technology and in corporates and tax to actually delivering on those promises in 2030 and beyond. And a lot of organizations are going to start feeling that pain and having to grapple with the potential trade off of getting certainty and how expensive that certainty could end up being. Second, I think there's going to be ever increasing pressure to move beyond just basic text generation. And I'm not talking about video or images here. I'm talking about the widening gap between what these tools can do and what most organizations are actually using them for. Right now, a lot of Gen AI adoption is stuck in the please edit this email or please summarize this document stage. And to be perfectly clear, these are 100% legitimate use cases. But when leadership asks, where's the competitive advantage I was promised? That's a much harder conversation. And I don't think many teams are going to be able to give answers their executives are looking for over the next few years. And it's going to be an ever greater strive to start delivering those answers. I think the organizations that pull ahead going into 2030 are going to be those pushing into more sophisticated territory, using their legal tech for complex analysis, decision support, and workflow automation. Everyone else will be racing the clock, trying to catch up before the ROI pressures from prediction number one catch up to them. And then, third, and probably the most uncomfortable prediction, is people should prepare for some instability in this sphere. And I'm not talking in the fun, things are changing and evolving kind, but the kind that creates real operational friction without much gain. Unexpected pricing shifts, discontinued features, changing API limits, a fundamental restructuring to services as they currently exist that doesn't necessarily result in more value for the end user. We've been hearing about an AI bubble for a while now, and there is a very real chance that some of that anxiety starts to materialize. Major cloud and AI providers have been building data center capacity at, let's be generous here, a extremely aggressive pace. If those projections don't materialize on schedule, it could pressure AI companies to be far less generous with their offerings, and as a result, we'd see pricing models shift. Indeed, some are already starting to. Google absolutely gutted its Gemini free tier overnight just this last month. Meanwhile, changes to paid service tiers will probably likewise follow for many providers, much in the same way we saw streaming services costs steadily rise over the last few years. You could easily see those kinds of costs double as we head into 2030. Features you've built workflows around could disappear or move behind new paywalls. For organizations that have become dependent on these new tools in the hunt for that aforementioned ROI, there's a real operational risk that these shifts impact your workflows as global sourcing divisions are pulled back into the discussion to renegotiate things you thought were already solid enough that you started building upon that foundation. So, those are some of the outlooks I am seeing for 2030. Additional accountability pressure, additional adoption pressure, and growing market shuffling. It's not exactly a recipe for a calm few years ahead, but here's the thing, that's what maturity looks like. The hype phase, the heating phase, that is coming to an end. The hard work of delivering on the heights of that hype are now beginning. The metal's hot, and now it's time to get hammered into shape. My main worry is that we need to avoid hitting our thumbs too much as we get to work.
Thanks, Bryce. That really sets a strong foundation on where the technology is heading and more importantly, the pace of the change we're dealing with. Natalie, I want you to build on what Bryce said from the human perspective. Even the best technology doesn't deliver value if people and organizations aren't ready to use it. You focus on the human side of tech and AI, that is, the culture, talent, an employee's experience at work. Looking across the employment landscape of those working in professional services in 2026, what do they and their organizations need to focus on this year to make sure the workforce is genuinely prepared for a 2030 tech-enabled reality?
Well, thanks, Greg. And I want to start out by saying that I agree with everything that Bryce talked about. That AI is indeed still in the experimentation. It's time to move beyond that and to hammer out and shape what AI is going to do into tangible outputs. Also, humans are a key part of that. Employees, there's evidence that's already come out that says that employees are overwhelmed by the sheer amount of AI tools, and that there's a real concern about an over reliance on AI. So, what I'm going to be talking about today are 3 moves that I think employees need to be doing now in 2026 so that they have a role to influence the future that we want to walk into by 2030. Right now, it feels like, I think, Nadia, this came up in a conversation that we had, that the machine is leading the human, right? Whereas if we want to have a future in 2030 that is truly working for humans, then employees need to be part of that. And so I want to talk about 4 key moves. 1 is investing in human connections. 2 is actively protecting our own individual brains. And 3 is consciously connecting to the why of our daily tasks to maintain meaning at work. So let me talk about first why it's important and how employees can invest in human connections at work. So when AI is always available and always agreeable, it's so tempting to just continue to use AI and go around people because AI is frankly easier to use. But human connection is a skill that needs to be maintained, and it's going to be even more important in 2030. So how can we invest in human connections now and build these daily habits that set us up for success in the future? Number 1 is choosing tasks where you intentionally are collaborating with employees and not just using a chatbot. Secondly is scheduling regular time with colleagues, either in person or virtually, to invest in small chat, to talk more about the deadlines, the work responsibilities, and the work tasks. And then finally, the third action is running towards interactions where humans add complexity. And those are the interactions that involve negotiation, giving and receiving constructive feedback, and where conflict is likely to show up. These are the moments that build trust and maturity and also strengthen our human skills for our future in 2030. The second move that I want to talk about is protecting your brain. So yes, AI is a gift, but it can also become a cognitive crutch if we're using it mindlessly, and that fear is already showing up in some of the data today. So to avoid this, I'm recommending 4 key actions now. 1 is to build brain workouts into your week. And so for important work, do the first pass yourself before asking AI to refine it. This is going to be key to making sure that AI does not erode your cognitive abilities. Second is looking at your week and determining blocks of time where you're not using AI at all, where you're taking the lead in the research, the thinking, the drafting before you use any AI-powered tools. Third is to build some weekly time where you are reflecting and staying aware of how AI is currently shaping your habits, thinking, and relationships, and where you may need to be making adjustments. And then fourth is when you are using AI, continue to interrogate it by asking what's missing, what could be wrong, what assumptions is the AI making on the outputs. And then the third move that I want to talk about is actively or consciously, continuously connecting to our why at work to continue to find meaning. Offloading too much to AI, it's easy to see how you can become a supervisor of outputs that you don't really feel connected to. So to avoid this, it's important to design your role for meaning by taking these two small actions on a regular basis. One is asking yourself which parts of your job make you feel proud and energized, and continue to do those. And then use AI to clear space around those parts of the job, you can make sure that you're taking the lead on those tasks that make you feel proud. And then secondly, it's really tying daily tasks to real outcomes. So consciously identifying how your work has helped customers, how your work has supported colleagues, and the impact of your work on those problems that you've solved. Taking all of these small actions today will help build critical habits that will enable humans to maintain central, to stay at the center of all of this technological change and this ubiquitous AI around us. And so those are the things that I think employees in organizations can support their own employees to do to build these habits today for an AI-powered future in 2030.
Thanks, Natalie. It really gives us a clear picture of what has to happen on the people side to make this technology story really, really happen. Rabia, let's turn to you next. You look at both government and courts, as well as corporate risk and compliance. And these are all areas in which technology and AI are really starting to reshape expectations. First, on the public sector side, when you think about government agencies and the courts, what do professionals in those environments need to do this year to better prepare themselves for a more tech enabled 2030?
So it's no surprise that the public sector is being asked to do more with less, and they're being asked to do a lot of different things, especially considering what politics have or how politics have changed recently. So there are a couple of things that they need to do in order to walk into a better tech enabled future. First, they need to look for efficiencies. They need to understand how their job impacts the bottom line, not just looking, as Natalie suggested, for the why, but looking for the how this why makes sense. They need to understand not only how that why makes sense, but how it gets to the bottom line and how they impact everyone. The next thing is they need to look for technology that will enhance their efficiencies. And in most cases, this is going to be a version of AI. So, just as Bryce said, what we're looking for is ways that this technology can better allow us to do things. And there are all different types of technology out there. So, there'll be different types of AI that'll be able to give different returns on investment. And we'll be looking for those types of technology to enhance the bottom line. The third thing would be to train on new technologies, meaning they need to learn the capabilities that are available and how those capabilities can help be applied to their job. Now, this may require doing more than just the things that you do in your everyday job, but for instance, doing things like using it would include things like using Chat GPT to create grocery lists or to help you plan your next trip. That will allow you to get comfortable with these new technologies and allow you to begin to use them and expand your knowledge on how to use them, especially in cases where these options may shrink or even enlarge. You need to be able to properly apply them to your job in order to do more with less. The next step would be to pay attention to the political and policy shifts and prepare to make those pivots. As we saw in 2025, there are these huge pendulum shifts with regard to political policies, and especially in the public sector, you need to be willing and able to make sure that you are shifting along with the policy within its legal limits to make sure that you can be successful in being a part of the bottom line and making these technology shifts work for you. And finally, they need to work to maintain and recruit tech-enabled talent. This means both looking for digital natives as well as those with the soft skills that make them more willing and able to learn technology and to learn the technology that's necessary to advance, especially when we're looking at the return on investment and beginning to understand these technologies in a way that's more successful. One of the things I've specifically looked into is the courts. Now, the courts are going to have to prepare for use of acknowledged and unacknowledged AI. They're going to have to prepare for hallucinations and they're going to have to prepare for these advancing technologies, some that they can use and some that they're slower to adopt. While there's no good way to predict what policy is coming down the pipeline, it's important for all public sector employees, be they government employees or specifically court employees, to stay vigilant and understand that there's two constants. First, change, and the second is technology. And a lot of times both of those go hand in hand.
Okay. Well, pivoting to the changes happening in corporate risk and compliance, as you look at how these functions are evolving, what should professionals in those roles be prioritizing this year in order to be ready for where we'll be in 2030? I mean, is it around training, collaboration, or investment, or is it something else?
So much like our public sector employees, the corporate risk and compliance sector is being impacted by political change, new technology, and a requirement to do more with less. The first thing that they need to do in order to handle this is to leverage AI in creative ways. As Bryce mentioned, sometimes your AI technologies is going to increase in capacity, other times it's going to shrink. So you have to be creative with the tools that you do have to properly resolve the issues that are coming upon you. And it's incumbent upon everyone to practice on these new technologies. The second is to look into new technologies, i.e., understanding what properly designed and custom technologies can be designed and used to handle common tasks, including productivity, but also to look at those same technologies in new ways to handle less common tasks that will help us move forward. The third step is to monitor and develop the new talent. You're looking for talent that, again, have these soft skills that make them more likely to learn and understand these technological advances, as well as tech natives who understand what talent is necessary, and what the things are that are coming out, and who are prepared to advance the technology. Fourth, they'll need to monitor changes in regulation, including supply chain issues. While regulations are constantly changing, we need to have people in place to be prepared to pivot, to grow, to learn new technologies, and to advance the old technologies. Next, they need to focus on data privacy and cybersecurity. While everything is changing and AI and technology is growing, we need to make sure that we're respecting individuals' personal and available information, as well as protecting the systems that we're using. And that focus on data privacy and cybersecurity will set them in a good place to have a positive perception. Next, they need to be aware of fraud and other financial crimes. It's one of the things that I've talked about quite a bit. Fraud, pig butchering, and other scams are huge news. And it seems like AI is not making it easier to catch these people, but rather making it easier for them to trick people or trigger people into scams. And litigation surrounding AML and Corporate Transparency Act is still ongoing. So, regardless of what the political administration is, they have to be aware of what those changes are going to be and learn how to resolve them. Overall, creating a culture of compliance from beginning to upgrade tech to hiring that protects customers, it needs to give off a perception of honesty, reliability, and forward thinking. So when we're looking at this tech enabled future, we need to make sure we're encompassing all of those things. And I know that was a lot, and I'm sorry for speaking fast, but I know that there's a lot that's going to happen between now and 2030, and everyone just needs to gear up and get ready.
Thanks, Ruby. No worries. There is a lot. There's a lot out there for everyone. But that was very useful insight about what professionals in public institutions, courts, and corporate risk and compliance departments are thinking about or need to be thinking about as they look forward to the next 5 years. Now let's turn to legal. Zach, you've been tracking both corporate legal departments and law firms, including how they're adopting AI and other technologies. Again, often under pressure to do more with less. Starting with the corporate legal side, in the coming year, what should corporate in house legal teams be doing now to prepare for a future in which technology and AI are much more embedded in how legal work is conducted, delivered, and managed?
Thank you, Greg. And I love that phrase, do more with less. That's something that you brought up. It's something Rabia just said. So let's dive into that a second. because when we looked at our law department operations index that released a few months ago, we had some numbers that really illuminated that. Number one, 56% of law departments right now believe that they're under resourced. And looking at the opposite end of that, I want to find those legal departments that feel like they're over resourced. I don't think those exist. Pretty much everybody is feeling the squeeze right now. Number two, when we asked, so how would you categorize your pace of change with regards to technology? 45% felt that they're moving slowly. So, under resourced, moving slowly. But on the flip side, about three quarters said, yes, we actively want to automate, we want to put in technology. So that's a bit of a disconnect, right? Are you under resourced? You're trying to do more with less. How do you have the time, the ability to actually put in a lot of that technology to institute it the way that it should be instituted? It's a little bit of a tough sell. And that's where I think a lot of legal departments are right now, is stuck in that muddy middle, knowing that they need to do something, but not having the time, resources, people to actually do that. So, when we're talking about 5 years out, what professionals need to do by 2030, there are two main keys that I think can help bridge that gap. Number one is something, honestly, that Bryce talked about a little bit earlier, finding receipts, finding the metrics, actually proving that what you're doing is helping the department. I was actually at a roundtable of GCs a few months ago, about 25 or so in the room here in Minneapolis. I asked the great old question, so who all believes they have positive ROI from AI tools? I got about three hands raised, and all three were very tentative to go up. And that's about right. Bryce talked about it earlier. Not many have hard and fast ROI from AI right now. But it's not even AI. It's pretty much any technology. And even extending it out, a lot of business processes, legal departments simply don't know how well they're doing. So that's key number one, is not only looking at internal metrics like employee happiness, usage of technology tools, making sure that things are running smoothly internally, but start to look outward. How exactly is what we're doing as a legal department impacting the larger business? By marrying a lot of your technology usage to overall business goals, that's where I think legal departments are going to move forward. Not only saying, oh, is AI making our own internal operations efficient, but asking, so it's a goal to connect more with our customers as a business. Are we, as a legal department, using AI to respond to customer inquiries more effectively? Are we using AI to think about new business lines and helping our business be able to spin up those new business lines more quickly? Marrying metrics to business is key. Number two, and I think just as important, more than half of legal departments within the LDO index want to collaborate with the larger business more effectively. And I think technology is going to enable that, but only if there is a uniform data source that you're working through. And I think that's something that in 2026 legal departments can do, is start to connect their data to compliance, to Nadia's going to talk tax and accounting here shortly, to the tax department, to the business at large. So if you're talking about how corporate legal is helping the rest of the business, you're working from a standard language. They're able to talk to, yes, I have insight into what compliance is doing. Compliance has insight into what legal work is doing. How can we work together moving forward? And it's only by bringing together all of this data that you really start to have data-driven decision making, which I think is goal number one of so many legal departments these days. Not only how am I working internally, but as we start to talk about law firms here in a second, to get to that outside decision making of how am I sourcing all of my outside legal work. It's only through really robust data.
Okay. And then shifting to the other side of the coin, law firms. As corporate legal teams adopt more tech and start building those expectations into their RFPs and outside counsel guidelines, what do law firms need to do this year? to stay aligned and competitive by 2030?
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned RFPs and outside counsel guidelines because a sneak peek into the AI professional services report that's going to release in a month here, we found that mentions of AI within those RFPs and OCGs has nearly doubled over the past year. And I'd expect that to go even higher in 2026 and beyond because just as we're talking about, as corporate legal departments are getting their own stuff in order, that's going to be an increased expectation of outside law firms to answer, hey, not only how are you using AI, which is where I think many are right now, but what is the value from this? One of the findings from our Future Professionals report last year, we asked the question of law firms, so how confident are you in articulating the value of AI? Only about 10% said that they feel very confident in articulating the value of AI right now. Very few said they weren't confident, but most were in that muddy middle where they at least understand this is what AI is supposed to do. They're getting into those conversations with their outside clients. This is how we are using it currently. But when it comes to the actual economics of the situation, that's where a lot of law firms are really not super confident in articulating what the future might look like. So that I think is number one key that many law firm professionals, many lawyers need to do in 2026 is understand that value. What exactly is technology bringing both to my practice as well as to outside client service, and then be able to talk that language from a business sense. Overall, the past couple of years, increasingly, consistently, I should say, rates have risen above inflation pretty much for the past 10 years. And we've seen in the past year more than 5% above inflation, law firms have been able to raise their rates. As a result, they haven't really had to have too many of those conversations about what is my key differentiator, because a lot of times ask for a rate raise and corporate legal departments are giving it. That's going to come to a head at some point, and we anticipate, if not in 2026, probably very soon, definitely by 2030. We don't think necessarily it's going to mean the end of the billable hour because there always is going to be that high value work. But what it does mean is that we expect a rise of value based billing. Basically, for that high dollar work, it's still going to be billable hour, but clients aren't going to uh, let that billable hour go on for forever for a lot of that commodity, repeatable work that is really the basis of a lot of revenue for law firms. They're going to have to think about this more strategically. How can I bundle this package to go to my outside clients where it's some billable, some flat fee, alternative fee arrangement, maybe billable with a cap. And then maybe we're going to have to think about how do we mix ALSPs, our own internal technology, into the equation to make sure that we're providing both the best value internally, making sure we're still making money as a law firm, but for outside clients as well. It's not an easy equation. It's one that I think a lot of law firms are going to have to figure out on their own and where their own value is provided over the next couple of years. But it's definitely something you're going to have to start thinking about in 2026.
Wow. Well, thanks, Zach. I mean, that's a powerful way to think about how technology will reshape legal work, not just in terms of tools, but in how value is defined and priced. Nadia, let's finish up with the tax side. Tax professionals, both in tax audit and accounting firms and within corporate tax departments, are being asked to handle growing complexity, often with tighter resources. At the same time, they're seeing more technology and AI enter into their workflows. From your perspective, what do corporate tax professionals need to do now to be ready for a more tax driven tax environment by 2030?
Thanks, Greg. You led correctly that um, compliance is becoming increasingly more complicated and expansive, global and local. Um, the nature of a corporate tax department um, has shifted and has been shifting. It's interesting. Year over year, when we survey this group, increasingly they've all said they wanted to do more strategic work. Well, guess what? It is at your doorstep. It's not even optional anymore. You might have thought it was optional. So, what I would say by 2030, the corporate tax department will kind of look this way. It's about intelligence, automation, and being agile. And, I have to start by where Zach kind of let off. It starts with data. Um, can't overemphasize that. It is the strength and the foundation of the department's data dictates what they will even do with any kind of technology, specifically AI. So, what I would say, it is a huge opportunity as it still is a vulnerability because, again, as many of you will attest to, your data sits across many different places and different ERPs, and oftentimes it's quite manual. So that would be first and foremost. You have to get that part right. Is getting your data in places where again it's automated, it can be accessed, um, and really align with the bigger business. First, starting by the finance department, that seems simple, but really and truly, it is getting data into a place where, again, it can be properly utilized. And then the second is about the technology, right? It isn't just about going out and buying everything. I recently, or I've been hearing recently, AI is not going to solve all your problems. So you really need to think about what it is you're trying to solve for. And that has to start with the understanding of what is it that what is it first I can automate? Does it make sense? Then overlay any other technologies on top of that. Is AI the right thing for this thing? Because AI isn't necessarily the Swiss Army knife that will solve all your problems. So there has to be the intentionality of where do I want to go next? What should be next? And then again, have those conversations, the broader conversations with the IT department. Does any of your technologies do any of your current technologies do what it is you think you might need? Really getting a deep, deep understanding of that. And the last piece I would say is, and of course, is the skills. And I've resisted saying upskilling and reskilling because, again, it's words that are thrown around for some people. It means different things. It could be extremely intimidating. So, what I would say is become technologically and AI fluent, right? Treat it as another language. Um, know enough. You don't have to become a data scientist necessarily, but what you do have to become is becoming comfortable with being able to analyze data, allowing to looking at outputs and being able to get a good grasp and that you'd be able to tell the story of what this data is providing. That really and truly is probably the key piece of elevating into even becoming a strategic be doing more strategic work because again being able to analyze the data and then using communication skills to communicate that information to, let's say, someone that does not have a tax background, that really is where it will put you on solid footing in being a strategic doing more strategic work, but quite frankly working better. The complexities of regulations is not going away. They are going to become more complex. I think there's no question about it. um, you overlay, supply chain tariffs. These are all things that probably didn't really sit squarely in the tax department, but now it is part of your work. So it is super important that you have to get the automated piece out of the under control, and then think about what technologies can assist you, how you might be able to use those technologies to help you statistically understand the data, but also help you to predict not just taxes, but also advise the business.
All right, that's interesting. Similarly, what do those tax professionals that work within tax firms need to do today to be ready for the changed landscape they're going to see in 2030?
It's interesting, Greg. I've resisted using is AI coming for your jobs or any of those things. But I did hear this quote, and I wish I remembered it. And someone's like, well, AI is actually coming for your task. And I like that. It's coming for your task, right? Tax professionals still spend quite a bit of time. I think the last studies I've looked at, maybe about 60% of their work is still fairly manual and repetitive. That's the place to start, right? Automate, automate. The regulatory bodies are already looking for information faster. They're using technology. So forget moving to about what your clients want and need. You've got to be able to meet the regulatory authorities. So that starts with that. You don't have time anymore to spend just doing manual work, or your employees don't have time for that anymore. It is a matter of you have to automate, overlay technology where you need to be. And the key trend, Greg, I do want to bring up is where the industry is heading. There are a number of factors that are shifting tax firms, tax audit, and accounting firms. I mean, whether it's private equity, there's mergers. The bottom line is something that's really hasn't happened before, and that's competition. And part of the competition is increasing is because the availability of technology and the taking away of the compliance work, basically, right? Everyone basically can do compliance work within seconds. So you as a firm, you as a professional, what now distinguishes you from everyone else? And that is really the place that I believe every tax professional, every tax firm has to be reflecting on in 2026, not even beyond. Early part of 2026, that is the reflection of you're no longer a compliance work. Anyone can get compliance work done. In fact, some financial institutions are offering it for free. Just bring me your other kinds of business. So what it is now is that you're an advisor and you have to become a strategic advisor to your clients. And that's where your time now has to be focused. Get the compliance work done, figure out what CRM you're going to use to manage your clients' data. But what you will now use your time for is distinguishing yourself from other firms. And that's going to require going really deep, meaning that you're going to become experts in particular fields. You're going to study what some of the emerging fields may be, including, um, the best part of a complex and expanding tax regulations is that there's opportunities. And for the really smart professionals, they will think about what those emerging fields can be and how they best can position their firms themselves to actually be an expert in it. So I would say for tax professionals, it's about becoming an expert and thinking about where you're going to be an expert. The common tax practice and accounting practice is, some will say it's going by the ways of becoming a dinosaur. You have to just be a specialist because your clients want more. And you have to be able to know their business to be able to service them best. And so that is going as deep as possible into specific industries. Crypto will be a big one to come. Um, so this is what 2026 should really be about, is specialization and using technology to help you with that. Again, you don't have to know the code, but what you will need to know, though, is how to analyze those data points from your clients and provide them the most deep and insightful insights into what they should be looking at and thinking about.
Well, thanks, Nadia. It's really insightful as to how tax in particular can turn this tech moment into a competitive and operational advantage. Well, we've covered a lot of ground here, from the broader technology landscape and the human side of AI to government and courts, corporate risk and compliance, legal and tax. Thank you all. That was great insight and some very valuable takeaways. And thanks also to everyone listening to this first Clarity podcast of 2026 from the Thomson Reuters Institute. We hope this conversation helps you set your own priorities for the coming year while keeping the year 2030 firmly in your view.
Echoing Greg's sentiments, thank you to Bryce, Natalie, Rabia, and Nadia for joining me and providing your own predictions of the future. A lot of ground covered, to be sure, but really, if you're going to keep up with the pace of change in 2026 and beyond, there is a lot to keep up with by necessity. But as we all noted, a little preparation can go a long way, and any work done now will be sure to pay dividends as we inch closer to 2030. Thank you as always for joining us for Clarity, powered by the Thomson Reuters Institute. You can follow or subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform, and don't forget to share with your colleagues, leave a 5-star review or a positive review on YouTube. For more data-driven analysis of today's professional services market and in-depth conversations with industry thought leaders, please visit us online at thomsonreuters.com/institute and follow us on LinkedIn under the Thomson Reuters Institute. Clarity is a production of Thomson Reuters, copyright Thomson Reuters 2026.